soft. Everything is my fault. I'll take all the blame. I'm deceitful shame. Suns and freezer burn. Choking on the ashes of a runaway. Choking on the ashes of a runaway.
Radio, where every Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, we bring you the latest in this ensuing takedown of this global criminal empire.
That's an image of strength.
You'll get the raw, hard truth here on The Tipping Point. So come join us Mondays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern in Studio B at revolution.radio.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right. You tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio.
Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time, cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David Dubine, creator of the Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age 2015 to 2035 video series. And I do welcome you this afternoon, this morning, this evening, wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Depends the vibration you're in is how you're looking at today, I must admit. But we've seen things uptick for just a couple, scales above the norm here from COVID. So wanted to talk tonight not about the event, but the knock-on effects, if you will. So talking about global grain supplies and possible food price rises because of this. But wait a minute. That was the same thing that was talked about with the grand solar minimum, that we were going to lose crops across the planet and there would be massive grain shortages and massive food rises, as we see every 400 years through history, going back 20 iterations of this cycle of 400 years. 8,000 years in the past, they were still experiencing the same exact things. Loss of food production, society changed greatly. Always has to be a scapegoat, maybe even an excuse, maybe even planned series of events to make excuses for fertilizer shortages that we're going to knock down, along with herbicide shortages. This year in 2022, May would have been let the cat out of the bag that we had massive fertilizer shortages and herbicide shortages. And
and a coffee cup of corn on the global market for the end of the year because corn's too heavy of a feeder and requires too much nitrogen input in between the rows during planting with glyphosate, don't have the supplies anymore. Farm inputs aren't there. You're going to have to switch. You're going to have to think of something ingenious. Well, that only explains away 12% of global loss of global crop production this year from this fertilizer and from the herbicide. They were planning to lose 12% of global agriculture this year anyway, just from that supply chain breakdown. And you could walk back years and say, what happened with the supply chains? Like, how did it just start breaking down magically all of a sudden? By May of this year, just 2 months from now, people would be well aware of what I'm telling you. Fertilizer shortages, globally 12%. Herbicide shortages, globally 10%. Not going to grow enough food this year. And suddenly this thing happens. Russia and Ukraine account for 29% of global wheat exports and 19% of the full corn exports around the world. Now, wait, let me rewind. Did I just say that there's not enough glyphosate for farmers to keep growing corn and the nitrogen is too heavy to feed the same crop? They could get more yield from beans, more yield from soybeans, cowpeas, iron peas, clay peas, pinto beans, black beans, kidney beans, any kind of bean that they could grow on a commercial crop level, they could sell because it takes less herbicides and fertilizer to grow the crop. So many farmers were switching away from corn anyway. Your price of everything was going to skyrocket, from your meat prices to the price of the fuel. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, ethanol was going to get really expensive, and your fuel, since it's mandated to have ethanol in it, was going to skyrocket anyway. Like, how many bases can you cover here with excuses already built into what's happening? Oh, fuel prices are up because of Ukraine. Well, they were going up anyway because we couldn't grow enough corn this year because we don't have enough fertilizer and herbicide globally. What happened to the supply chain? Like, you think in a supply chain scenario that it would be the priority to get you fertilizers and herbicides to grow food for the planet. Like, everything else stops. Don't give me trinkets of junk from China to put in Walmart. Don't do that. Focus on getting me the stuff like urea. I need that to grow crops. Give me phosphorus. Give me, yeah, give it to me. Anything. Compost, I'll take it. Supply chains broke down. How they just magically broke down? Yeah, COVID. Well, what was COVID? Oh, wait, all those people were protesting central banking in 2019. Rewind to the repo crisis 2019. Where I think the Fed was putting in $500 billion, not $1 billion, $1 trillion every night to keep the financial markets afloat because banks didn't trust banks enough to lend to each other. Fact check it out. September, October, November 2019. 23 countries, I stand corrected, 23, and which is interesting because 23 is also, you know, a known number in occult circles. But 23 countries, as of that time, were protesting central banking and fiat currencies, debasements of currencies, and their lifestyles being degraded by central banking. Hundreds, plural, of millions of people on the street every single day for weeks and weeks and weeks protesting central banking. And suddenly, boom, COVID comes. 6 feet apart, no more protests. Trucker convoys screaming down the highways right now everywhere. The whole entire world's on it again. The entire planet's all about, we the people control the supply chain. We the people control the supply chain. If you believe the myth. Cat's out of the bag. Now all countries are moving to these types of, we control the supply chain. We're going to show you how many trucks we control, and we are going to say, now you stand down, change the laws, change the mandates, or we just stop all your food anyway. See, another built-in excuse. So I just have trouble believing that this is starting right now with all those other things I've talked about just prior here in the introduction. Food prices up. And as we go through tonight, I'm joined by Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films, But a lot of people are talking about the event. I'm just talking about the repercussions in, the grain pricing and what that's going to be for your food and fuel price. But you see how many other things. Why are we not drilling? Why did they put I'm going to say one last thing here. I saw the Biden administration freezes oil and gas drilling leases today. Set another set of laws in to freeze oil and gas drilling leases when we know we are going into a massive fuel shortage thing here. And they're stopping the leases for drilling. This is comical, really it is. You look in the bizarro world. And Ransom, thanks for joining. I hope you can explain it a little better than I. But you see, food price going up. So most people would probably want to go today. Tomorrow, the realization for the American public will probably happen more like water cooler talk. People will talk another day to absorb. But by Saturday and Sunday, supermarket runs on in America. Forget the trucks. Supermarkets runs on because people's fear of getting stuff cut off here from the States. So how you feeling, Ransom? It's a great night to be alive, man. They're so exciting. You feel the energy in the air.
Yeah, it's really trippy. I feel like I'm stuck in a cycle. I've been kind of glued to this Ukraine thing, mostly because it was all predictable, and we kind of been talking about it for a while before they actually got there. And I'm showing everybody oil 101 a barrel right now, and it's going up, and that kind of fits into what you were talking about. The other night, I was watching a guest that you have on quite often on your show, was on the Oppenheimer Ranch project, and I think his name was Jeff Nyquist. You guys talked to him a lot, but he was kind of breaking down this Russia situation, and I couldn't agree more, because I talk about the same thing all the time. What we're watching in real time now is the consolidation of powers on a global scale. And I'm about positive that the Soviet Union, they changed their flag and everything, but they've had a long-term strategy for some time, and right now they kind of just told America, yeah, right, we technologically are more superior to you as far as nukes and other things, and you're not going to do nothing, and you're going to back off, and this isn't even a NATO country, so it's very doubtful that we'll get involved. And then I seen that text that you sent me talking about this whole area that we're talking about there that's going to be a conflict zone, which, by the way, is the same area, the Shatter Belt area, all through Eastern Europe there, where the world wars always start. But I see this one as a consolidation of the world communist New World Order. And that just seems to be what's going on. China is open about that they back this Russia play. They're also pretty much saying that they're about to invade Taiwan, which is going to skyrocket the prices of gold, of food, of grain, of oil. Everything is going to go so far up in scale of money that no one's going to be able to afford anything. And, I'm going to go ahead and say the communist kind of agents have been setting that up over here in the United States for some time. And I kind of count the neocon group, the Republican establishment, as part of this, because we've been watching them shut off all of our energy independence as a nation, what you were talking about right there. So they're trying to bankrupt and destroy the United States and any other country like it. So you can kind of count Australia and New Zealand and Japan and South Korea, kind of the little Anglo-Saxon empire that's been together as basically converting to the New World Order of communist style. And it's being backed by all the major players that you would think about, like Klaus Schwab and George Soros. And, they all want this conflict to happen here so that they can rearrange the map for the third time. We had the League of Nations, and then we had the United Nations, and now we're going to have the one world nation, kind of with this whole cryptocurrency. Everybody's on the cryptocurrency, and I've been just reading article after article about how the world's governments are jumping, head first into cryptocurrency. They just want a little bit of regulation, and then they want to control it, which tells me that they're about to end the paper dollar system worldwide. They're going to say the money's too easy to commit crimes and things like that. And then we're going to be set up as this last third world country that's being punished by kind of the globalists for being the place where we thought we had individual rights at. But you can see everything across the board, and I kind of wanted to get into this. How hard do you think that this will hit the worldwide food market if 30% just is right around in that area where we know that they're not going to be shipping it out or selling it or getting on the world market if it's a conflict in a combat zone? So I see this as like the next domino along the lines as we're talking about the other event has kind of run its course. However, all of these countries are still keeping those powers. And I was showing people on my last show, they're reporting bird flu in every state on the East Coast. Just about the poultry's got it, the wild birds have got it. It's in Delaware, it's in Florida, it's everywhere. So they're going to start harping the fear about the viruses again, and then they're going to keep telling us that it's because of this conflict, even though I don't mean recession, the inflation was out of control long before anybody actually did any movements in the Ukraine. So, but they're going to say that well, they already are. I've been watching it, the talking heads talking about how this is the reason that we're going to have the food shortages. This is the reason why everything's going to be expensive. And, it's the reason inflation's skyrocketing. So this is the perfect boogeyman for the communists here in the United States to just back up and pretty much let us be taken over.
And you don't starve to death with rations. You just get less. You got to do with more. You have to be innovative and combine different things that you hadn't before and be more frugal with what you cook and what you throw away and how you recycle things. You can still survive on rations. But that ration card is not it's going to be a digital one this time, I believe. But I don't know how people would pay their phone bills then, or would want to, or pay their internet bill to be able to stay online. I mean, is that going to be like a tax where you must now pay if you don't have the internet company for your phone, then you die because you don't get food, or you can't do anything because your digital ID, you can't even pay your utility bill unless you pay the fee to be online. Another scam. Yeah. Now it's a life tax. Literally, the internet bill would be a life tax almost. But I can only really speak from historical precedent on something like this, because you asked the question about the food price rises. So far, if you go back to 1690, coming out of the moderate minimum, which started approximately 1640, it really got noticeable 1645, and then in 1650s, they're not sure exactly when. It was in one of those first, 2 to maybe 5 years of the 1650s, that grand solar minimum hit, and I mean it hit. Jet streams went out of their flows. Cloud cells in the wrong place, extreme storms, winds, or excessive rains, etc. They just couldn't grow food reliably. Now that era mimics what was in the 1430s, where historically at times like this, food goes 4x up in price. It'll spike for, months, as in 6 months, 2 quarters of a year, but then it'll drop right back off to the stable. So let's say it's $1 today, and we get into one of the historical norms, which happens every grand solar minimum. You would definitely expect quadrupling or, 7x food prices. which is the maximum. See, and then I want to frame it like this. So from historical precedent, the maximum there's only ever been in the last 2,000 years is a 7x increase in the price of the food. 7x. Now, historically, it sits at 4x, which is the average. But the highest it's ever hit before things collapsed down, I guess, and then whoever was left just restarted and said, okay, we don't need to pay 7x for our food. We need to start something we're going to trade again smoothly here. So speaking on historical precedent, I mean, if you went that far above a Sigma event, where they'd be like, we're not 3 Sigma events, 5, 6 Sigma event, way above that, I don't know. So if you're paying $1 a day for something, well, the historical average, you're going to pay $4 for it, and that's for food. And then on some extremes, you pay $7 for the same exact thing right now. Do you pay $1 for? I mean, you got to look how that's could move society. This is just based on past historical cycles. And I encourage you to look into the Sporer minimum. That's it. And at the same time, England's really meticulous about taking records like their Navy did. They're really meticulous record takers. They dropped out for some 10 years where they had no records of the sheep and the cattle and the pig pork production for what was then England. There weren't enough people to hit the basic services to keep them running, so there's this gap in the record back then. At the same price as food price spikes hit. There's a lot of correlations in history about, so there's things that we can't predict in the future because it never happened before. Now, I'm not going to say it won't go to 10x or 100, whatever, because we're at the end of a system. But just historically, I will say, on the record, I would say 7x would be the max right now, and 4x would be your target that you'd be looking for, and probably before the end of 2022. Because I didn't think it would come until the end of 2023, after the second year of massive crop losses, based on the same exact things I'm talking about, the cycles of incredibly low solar activity, and our magnetosphere on the Earth not locking in those systems as they used to with a really strong, intense magnetic field on the planet, which it's not now. It's weakening, and our North Pole is wandering. So there's a lot of things that are not very similar in terms of electromagnetism and polar orientation, polar wander, compared to the last grand solar minimums. But perhaps there were, and we just didn't have the records to match that. But I digress. We're in a really weak magnetic field right now, so things are going to go more awry with the jet streams, cloud cells, rain. Winds, have you noticed the winds? The winds across the planet are getting really intense everywhere. There's double systems collapsing on each other, record wind speeds like are minutely now across the planet. And I will say one last thing on a woo-woo factor here, Ransom. Because you mentioned that area of the world seems to be like the epicenter of the wars, but same thing that overlaps there is the Denisovans. And all those archaeological finds of what you consider Denisovan culture of lost peoples is in that exact same area, which is a little, okay, it's anecdotal. It's just interesting.
No, you're absolutely right about that. Actually, that's an area where they found it's the whole Eurasia area there in the Black Sea. It's been speculated to be the original source of one of the flood myths in a lot of different cultures, because there's a whole thing at the bottom of the Black Sea there. And then on top of that, you're right about the Denisovans and Neanderthals seem to have met there. They find a lot of interaction at that point. And then later on in history, they find all kinds of cool stuff, like different types of skulls that were definitely killed by violence that they find through the region there. And it is kind of bizarre that that's like the epicenter of where civilizations cross and ethnicities mix and all of these different things throughout history. There's some weird mojo about the area, definitely. Or that's the reason why all of the global elite and stuff like that like to manipulate that area, because they know they can get different people to take different sides. And it's leading a perfect excuse for all of the things that's going on right now. You have like Biden talking about they're not ruling out doing all these cyber attacks, which is basically that, us and Russia will just start exchanging different cyber attacks, turning off grids, turning off all of these things. Meanwhile, they're, the planet and the whole thing is changing, but they have plenty of stuff to keep regular people distracted and not able to meet the needs of their resources. And I was just looking at a map um, right here, and I'll show it for everyone, that shows the distribution of population that couldn't afford a healthy diet in 2017. And like you would expect, you would see Africa, parts of South America, India, and some of the Pacific Islands. And the only thing I'm thinking now is, are they going to color in these northern countries like Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and then the United States, Canada, because we obviously, everything's coming to a head, between the protests, and what a perfect way to take the attention away from the worldwide protest of the truckers. And by the way, I'm meeting up with Diamond tomorrow in Albuquerque on Interstate 40 for the People's Convoy that's supposedly headed to DC, and we're going to go check that out and see some of the people there and film it. But besides that, did you see some of the things coming out of the White House where they've already authorized the National Guard to deal with them? They're talking about putting up roadblocks and fences and stuff. It kind of shows you the degree of the country's kind of retaliation to any uprising of individual freedoms anymore, and that's happening in all of the supposed countries that are free countries. So soon, they'll use all of these new powers to implement the hurt on the populations with food. If you don't do this, you're not going to get food. You're not going to get to shop here, you're not going to get to shop there. And overnight, as you can see in the Ukraine, I actually showed a compilation of film from the Ukraine, and overnight they already have food shortages, nothing to eat, plus bombs blowing up everywhere. So overnight, anywhere you are in the world, things can go topsy-turvy, whether it's a storm, a cyber attack, whatever it is. But what a perfect time for the governments to try to expand their empires into this change in the world, because I think they know there's going to be squabbling over food resources, and China and Russia have pretty much teamed up to be the counter.
Well, that was the plan, man. That was the plan,
yeah.
to cause as much chaos as possible to implement all these new systems for the fourth world or the fourth turning, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so strange, because if you remember, Putin's being really funny to the world right now. Matter of fact, did you see the thing that they're saying that Ukraine has weapons of mass destruction? And I was joking earlier on my channel about, it's just like what we did with the yellow cake uranium. He's like, well, I'll just play one of the playbooks of the Americans. They got weapons of mass destruction. We'll just go look for them here and there, everywhere, but they don't have it. So Putin's really playing our game now. And he's pointing out that he's eradicating neo-Nazis that, even display that they're in the Ukraine, it's not a big deal for people to display that they're pro-Nazi, and it's a weird development. And that some of the holdouts of the people that were allied with the Nazis were also in the Ukraine there. So it's really weird that after all of this Nazi this, Nazi that, back and forth, and everybody being compared to Hitler, that Putin is now pointing out that most of the people and targets that he's going after specifically are the people with the Nazi affiliation. And you got to remember, George Soros dumped, God knows how much money into this, and around 2014 to cause a conflict there. And it's ironic that his history with the National Socialists, if you want to call them that. He was a big time sympathizer and would go show people, show them where wealth and some of the families were hiding their money, and he got a little percentage of that. Now he's one of the richest people in the world, and he gets to decide sometimes what happens. So in unison, you see these same characters talking about the Great Reset in connection with these conflicts and upcoming cyber warfare and grid down. I was just watching a whole Klaus Schwab speech talking about exactly that, about how the power would be turned off. It's really just out there where we're at right now, but we did predict it all.
Wait, Ransom, I think your power just turned off. Where to even begin? I don't know. The National Guard was called in Tennessee because it's right next to Virginia. So this is, I'm just going to say I heard, and that's all I'm going to say, that with the truckers going into DC, they were told to stay out of DC jurisdiction because that's federal in DC, but like one street over in Virginia or Maryland, that's state law. Way different rules. Once you go into the federal district, then you are toast. Stay outside into the states, that's legal. They're going to make up stuff on the inside there. And then B, that they would put up check posts across an enormous amount of small interstates, large interstates, between state lines, and checks to see if you had a manifest on board to be able to transit through that state if you're on business, not on business, but if you're moving through, like if you had a delivery up in Maine, that counts. If you're in Georgia or Tennessee, that you're going that direction. But if you have no manifest and you're from California with no manifest, they're going to be like, you can't pass. And many people say, well, that would create the hugest roadblock ever. Like you would set up traffic jam for 100 miles. Yeah, but it'd be 400 miles from DC, so nobody would show up because they'd be traffic jammed by all these other people called up like hundreds of miles away to cause the traffic jams. We're trying to check papers and do all these things, hundreds, if not 1,000 miles away from it. You know, I was like, they're going to cause the traffic jams on purpose, but in different places. So none of the protesters or whatever can get to DC. So then they'll be like, no, nothing happened. See, people love us. Still, man, see, the most popular election in history, everybody still loves us. There wasn't even one protester that showed up. Huh? They all love us. And do a fully empty, like a rose garden or blah. Oh my gosh. But I do want to say, you know, you talked about the Denisovans and the Neanderthals living together there for a moment. You know, those two species living together as dominant species at that time. But one of them became upper-handed somehow over those 40,000 years, 30,000 years, 20,000, whatever it was, that cohabitation period with Denisovans and Neanderthals. There was an equilibrium of thought, idea, vibration, whatever, coexistence, and then something happened and the Neanderthals jumped ahead. And Denisovans we don't really know about, but we know way more about Neanderthals because we, the Homo sapiens sapien, came from the Neanderthal. If you believe that story in line of downward flow, or you could listen to Michael Tellinger, maybe get a different idea about South Africa. But with that being said, you know, Neanderthals and Denisovans living at the same time together. It's almost like we are now, the Homo sapiens sapien, going to soon be living with transhumanists and micro assemblies in their bodies moving forward. You know, it rings a lot of similar bells in there. Is the Homo sapiens sapien going to be the Denisovan? As something transhumanist becomes more smart to try to outsmart the Homo sapiens sapien pure blood humans? I'm not sure. But we are going to share the same space together for a little while like Denisovans and Neanderthals did. Just like gold and silver and Bitcoin will share the same space in a collapsing fiat world. Anyway, Ransom, back to you.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and I've been talking about that a lot. We're at the separation point of species, and I don't know how long it'll be that it'll take before one group comes to the conclusion that the other group can no longer be around, because I think that's maybe that's one theory about what happened to the other hominids around when Cro-Magnon kind of started dominating the scene and became Homo sapien. However, with our genetics, we all know that we're admixtures of, you know, at least 4 different hominids, which is weird that they don't teach that too much in school. I mean, you have to really start reading papers on ancient man and genetics to even know about that.
Right, can I throw a
yeah.
thing? You said Cro-Magnon. Yeah, and that's exactly right. Because think about the progression downward from Neanderthal. We're always, as right now, Homo sapiens sapien, credited with coming down from the Neanderthal and the whole evolutionary thing coming down to right now. But very little credit's given for a human right now to be associated with Denisovan. I mean, a straight line got to be Neanderthal, only down to Cro-Magnon, bam, and it's Homo sapien, right?
Well, yeah, they were all different species, like totally though. So the only reason we know that we mixed with them is because we're finding some of their DNA in our DNA. So we know we mixed at some point with not just Neanderthal, but Asians actually have a lot more Denisovan DNA associated with their phenotype. So you can kind of just literally, like whenever you read some of these ancient tales, talking about the different peoples when they mixed, they talk about this exact event. Plato talks about it. Different people have wrote about it. But that was in their ancient world, even. And we're reading ancient text about ancient times and their old. So they're literally talking about some kind of memory of when there were multiple species. And I think that's where a lot of the myths and legends in Europe come from about like elves and dwarves and different stuff like that. It's really just descriptions of different admixtures from the past that no longer exist. But something happened that upgraded the main group where the other ones disappeared. So they did go extinct, except for if you consider them part of us because of the admixture. But it's so small of a percent of the overall thing that they don't even know really what the main hominid was that became Cro-Magnon, because he just shows up. I mean, and they kind of describe them as different types of Homo sapien. Whenever the mainstream talks about it now, they say archaic human or modern human. But 40,000 years ago, this Cro-Magnon guy looked, he was probably just like most Europeaners, except for they probably look a little different because of the admixture. But a lot of people don't know this. The Canary Islands, when the Spanish started conquering them, they have all these little, right now they have an active volcano recently, but all over those two islands there are pyramids that are just out of place. And when the Spanish showed up, there's these big 6-foot tall, white, red-headed dudes with spears that seemingly have been segregated from the world for a really long time until the Spanish first got there, and the Spanish lost, and then they had to come back and conquer them. And those people are called the Ganges, and scientists think that is the like a I don't know how to say it without sounding bizarre in today's world, but basically they were purebred Cro-Magnon people that somehow got separated from the rest of the world, and then they got wiped out. They probably had some ancient knowledge. A lot of people speculate that those people, the Berber in North Africa and the Basque in Spain, are all remnants of an Atlantean society, and each one actually had that in their mythos as where they came from. So it makes you wonder, are we going to have these mythos, like 900 years from now, with the two groups of people, where they're finding the ancient modern man next to, these robotic people are finding it. I don't know. It seems like that is definitely the way it's going, though. Every article in tech now is related to your connection to the grid. And it's so weird that we're simultaneously trying to merge man and machine in this technocratic system, but also scaring everybody with taking it away with grid failures and war and famine. So obviously only one group of people is going to get to enjoy that, and that's the people that sell out to this technocratic system. And we're about to find out who those people are real soon, when the bellies get hungry and people get tired of being rationed. And the only answer to that is to be self-sufficient and start growing your own stuff, even if if you're not even paying attention to all the nanotech that they're now putting into all the food. Just for that reason alone, you got to wonder, are they putting the nanotech in the soil and the manure that you get from the feed stores, Walmart, etc.? Is there even a way to escape this? Because from what I understand about the viral situation right now, there's no way to escape it. It's been delivered to so many people in the world that most people will be affected by it, even if they didn't participate in the program.
Well, I stand corrected. That was a very interesting statement. I didn't know that there were a lot more Denisovan DNA markers in races of Asians than Europeans. But what is that for? think about the time frames, because if you go back to Michael Tellinger, he's talking about in South Africa. Now, I'm going to just go down one train of thought. You can agree, disagree, but I'm just kind of talking about Michael Tellinger's work down in South Africa and Zimbabwe. And if you go to the Kalahari ruins as well, you're going to find massive canals that are 75 feet between them that are hundreds of miles long, all with the exact same build and dimensions to funnel the Okavango Delta during the wet season through all these canals and grow enough food for, they've done the calculations, enough food for 1 billion people. Kalahari canals, you need to check it out. And it's even visible on Google Earth. You can definitely very easily see those parallel lines. And, there's been a lot of researchers going out there and taking a look, measurement, double measure, triple measure, see how long these things are to try to verify. Yes, indeed, it was, they grew them on top of these plateaus between where the water was flowing through. Now, 75-foot gap between these, okay, 2 or 3, maybe the same, okay, but not hundreds, plural, all the same distance between each other. I mean, obviously, over the thousands of years of erosion, there are some bits that don't match up, but as a general, when you look at it from a wider view, they match. They're in parallel. Well, this matches up with Michael Tellinger's work talking about 400,000 years ago, that the Homo sapiens sapien was a creation of the Anunnaki to work in the gold mines. And then all those stone corrals that you see, supposedly they were cattle corrals. There were like more than 1 million of those 40,000 years ago plus, according to the regular classical historian. But there weren't that many people living in the whole area to have that many cows or cattle to have millions of those pens around. And then you need to go in Zimbabwe and find more of those. And there's a few in Mozambique, but if you get over in Namibia, there's a lot in Botswana, there's a ton there too. So it wasn't just in Zimbabwe or just in South Africa, those stone circles, the stone configurations. But a lot of them didn't even have connecting inner bits. So, I mean, I don't know how you could have driven cattle in there. So the story goes, humans, as we know us right now, Homo sapiens sapien, created 400,000 years ago. But that would have brought us through 4 different ice ages up to the present interglacial. So knowing that the Denisovans were only 80 to, I'll even give it, I'll go 90,000 years ago. We're already deep into this super deep glaciation that covered Chicago with 2 miles of ice. That glaciation, the most recent one, was during the time that they took precedence on the planet. But you know where they were? Right in these same areas we're talking about conflict now. Massive society. And then what happened? Because the weather patterns would have stabilized for how many tens of thousands of years during that time? And where did the Neanderthal just pop out of? Okay, that's a classical historian's presumption of timelines. But what if Neanderthal were really 800,000 years ago? Because a lot of these finds that are popping up everywhere, they don't seem to really fit the layers or it just seems incredibly more ancient. Like you talked about the Baltic Sea. I did a whole video on that. And also off of Israel, there's an entire civilization about 40 feet underwater, the entire coastline. And the Baltic at the same time was inundated with rising floodwaters from this latest interglacial after the melt off. So I don't know if timelines are right, but if you follow what the classic historians say, Denisovans 80,000 years ago, then Neanderthal 40,000, Cro-Magnon, and then us, and popped out of the Ice Age. So we got 2 conflicting stories from cuneiform texts from researchers in Zimbabwe and South Africa saying that, nope, 400,000 years ago, created Anunnaki. And then, there's 2 sets of stories of exactly what went on. So which one are we to believe? But it's interesting, it's the same area where Ukraine and that whole Bosnian area, the whole Bosnian pyramids, which are far older, and that they had to stop the excavations. Don't know why. It would have been so easy to disprove it. Let them keep digging. They're not going to find anything. It's not a pyramid. Dude, I would be like, dig to your heart's content. I want to prove you wrong. Keep digging. No. They got to stop all digs. You can't even like take one shovel of dirt off that mountain anymore without getting a permit or getting written permission from the Archaeological Institute there. Not even a single shovel of dirt. So a little kid going with a sandcastle shovel, a little plastic shovel, shovels that. That's technically against the law. And you will go to prison for doing that on the Bosnian Pyramid Mountain Range area. No, what are they covering up? So I just don't know. That's too many things going on. I'm trying to get a timeline because, this cycle we're enduring right now, that's just beginning with these crop losses. It's built into this too. So we can go on larger cycles, then we can try to whittle it down to shorter cycles. So Ransom, I don't know, man, you know more about the progression of the DNA down through until present day.
Well, there's a lot of credence to what Michael Tellinger is talking about, and especially if you link them to the Anunnaki stories, because you have, I don't know what the date is on these ancient gold mines, but you were talking about food production. They would have had to have massive food production in order to run these mines. It's actually, quite a sophisticated thing that was supposedly happening hundreds of thousands of years ago in Africa. And really, this is a touchy subject because you have archaeology's version of events, and then you also have geneticists' version of the genes that pop up. So, according to modern genetics, there is at least 5 different hominids that mixed. That make up the modern Homo sapien sapien. You have Cro-Magnon, you have Neanderthal, you have Denisovan in Africa. They don't give it a name, but up to 20% of sub-Saharan Africans is some other DNA of a different hominin. They just call it a ghost species. Now, you might get in trouble sometimes for talking about this subject because you're not supposed to, because they have this artificial idea of races that they give everyone. But the truth is that we're all different percentages of admixtures from about 5 different hominids, and maybe even more. When you start including stuff like the Paracas skulls of South America that has a paternal DNA that's unknown, also like from an unknown hominid possibly. And then you have a ghost species that they also call it in the Polynesian Islands, where DNA is picked up that's not actually from the main DNA group of what they call Homo sapien. So whenever you hear these stories about ancient gold minings, and then you hear the stories about Enki talking about different versions of humans that he made, and then you skip to the future and their little timeline, and then the supposed Anunnaki start mixing with humans on top of that. So that would be like, a 6th, 7th different admixture walking around the earth at different times at the same time. And it's very possible that they just moved to a new place and then made a new batch of different people. And when you mix in the story of like the Tower of Babel and stuff like this, you realize that man may have had a really large advantage at one version of the hominid that they made, because along with the Bible stories, all of a sudden they got upset, maybe fearful of humans, that we were reproducing too fast and that we could do what they could do. So at some point we had a regression update this time, not a upgrade, but a downgrade, to where our language skills were diminished and our cognitive abilities were diminished, and also our lifespan. And you hear different versions of that story as well about the lifespan, like the ancient people in the Abrahamic religions lived 900, 1,000 years. But then when you go back before that and you start looking at the Sumerian kings list, we're talking 10,000 year lifespans. And then it goes all the way down to like Methuselah, etc. And then now we're down to 120 years, which both of those stories talk about how humans were, reduced to only 120-year lifspan. And that's exactly what modern genetics says right now, is that basically your telomeres will fall apart regardless of disease and environmental factors about the age of 120. So I think that we're exactly at one of these points. This is just another long line of interference in the genetic code, and that's what's happening right now. And I think it's going to be another downgrade, or possibly, I was actually talking about this with someone else the other day, that they may be altering children in a certain way because they have think tanked it out that so many children will be off, but a percentage of those off children will be exceptional at something that they need, like programming or complex mathematics far beyond what even a genius level human being can do. And they may be trying to cultivate changes in the genetic code where they could use it in that way, but for the rest of everyone it has negative effects, and the only answer for them, and we're starting to see it, is population reduction. It seems like every couple of years someone gets the go ahead to wipe out 1 million people or so. I mean, it happened in Africa like in the early 80s, and then we did it in the 90s, and then there's been skirmishes all through the so-called Cold War, a lot of people call World War III, that already happened. Millions and millions of people wiped off the face of the earth. And now we're at a point where we're about to be in a technological World War IV that involves the earth changes that seem to have happened at the same point in history, when the number of hominid species reduced, and only one came through. So it's kind of a mystery if we're going to be the holdout of a pure kind of modern human being, or will we be outpaced and replaced by the technocratic system and their transhumans?
We're being grown like bacteria in a petri dish as an experiment. Yeah, but I could see where there would be manipulation of genes. Let's say it was in South Africa and all of Michael Tellinger's work is correct. So if you had that level of technology, you could keep a massive separation between, and perhaps the Denisovans and Neanderthals are just a natural thing and they were unmanipulated as they moved through time. But since we found those records within the last ice age, because they really don't find down much down in South Africa now, do they? They try to pin it at date 90,000, 100,000 years ago. And then you find little things that are just missing, like Lucy up in Kenya. That's 4.5 million years old. Right? Okay, the original hominid. Great. But Africa has a much older timeline scale associated with such hominids. So it seems maybe the tinkering was done in that area, but other areas were left alone. Now think about that. And then you let it go for 100, 200,000 years with no contact. You put some sort of wall there, like giant forest, I don't know what it would be, maintain it, and you could definitely separate the planet. Much like now, the elitists have all of their, think about the difference between if you have $100 million and if you're, working a regular job, like the difference of separation of that in terms of private bodyguards, private air transportation, private train, car, the whole car is yours, and, private drivers and these types of hotels that are $5,000 a night for a regular room, whatever it is, their own palatial estates with guards and gates. Like they don't even ever mix. Like that's the same exact thing. If you were to do gene experimentation in one continent and have the tech to cut it off from another one, like the separation would be that vast between the natural mixing, I guess. What would you call that? Interbreeding of Neanderthal and Denisovans?
Yeah, there's plenty of evidence that says that those two were intermixing and making admixtures also.
But if one had been much more advanced in terms of genetic manipulation, which one would be an easier species to control? Because, there's so many, and I'm going to go a little woo-woo here, but, if you read and listen to accounts of different Sabe or Sasquatch encounters, there seems to be such an advantage to the older species that's been here for millions of years that it can affect the mind in many, many different ways. So if you're looking at something easier to control as a worker bee, if you will, the Sabe or the Sasquatch would not be the one thing you wanted to work with, because they are so many miles above us. That'd be like herding tortoises, like how fast they can move and grab you or an object or hunt. They're like herding turtles. Like, why would you do that? Because they're so easy to just reach down and grab. That's how more superior they are to us right now. So if you're going to be trying to have a race of easily controllable worker bees, again, you're going to want to dumb them down and take a telomere shorter in lifespan, maybe 50 years. So Maybe they just wouldn't learn as much. Because you can imagine what you'd learn in 10,000 years if we had the internet, or even better net of pure knowledge plugged into the river of consciousness. For 10,000 years, what you would know on this planet, like things you could not get away with because everybody would know all the scams that have ever been pulled before. But 50 years, 90 years, just when you're learning it all, most people pass around 90 to 100 just when they're understanding a lot of it because they've seen it all twice, 3 times. Now knock that lifespan down to 50 or 40 and Logan's Run, man. Damn, they're going to Logan's Run. Are they not?
Yeah, there was an episode of the old Star Trek too that had that. They landed on a world where people just lasted 30 years and then that was their time, and they were all happy and they never had to work and they were connected to the computer. And what a fantastic metaverse. I see the draw kind of that they're giving to the young people to connect to this new system, and it's kind of scary. Generation Z and the millennial generation have kind of hook, line, and sinker, but it's actually Generation X's fault for allowing it to happen because we kind of saw it unroll and haven't done much about it. And I kind of wanted to talk about what you were talking about. What is the next phase of devolution is kind of the way I'm describing it. At some point, all these archaic humans, including Neanderthal, Homo sapiens of that time, were big, robust, muscular, thick-boned. They weren't super different than our heights now, but they were definitely more hardy of a creature. And now when you kind of look at the latest generation, you kind of see a very big difference recently, even compared to the great generation and the silent generation, the farmer generation, so to speak. It's kind of gone downhill.
We'll be right back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. David Dubine, Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films, joining me right here on Revolution Radio Studio A every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. Listener supported. freedomslips.com. Check out that donate button if you like free speech. We'll be back in 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Continue our conversation about food price rises you can expect and how to protect your families and communities moving forward from right now.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Are you interested in the paranormal, murder mystery, real natural law? Do you enjoy interviews with amazing guests? Then join Crypt Rick every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Revolution Radio. Studio A, freedomslips.com. Crypt Rick's I've Been Thinking. Welcome to the Crypt.
Join me at Revolution Radio, Studio B, at 11 a.m. on Saturday for Free Association, when we take a look at philosophy, spirituality, psychology, social issues, and geopolitics. It's every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Studio B at freedomslips.com.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Galactic Interstellar Council on Revolution Radio Studio A, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us as we traverse the starseed paradigm, as expressed in the time-space continuum that we know as the divine expression of love and light. Integrating this conscious unity into the galactic paradigm. So welcome all, both terrestrial beings and galactic beings as one. So be it. You're listening to Revolution Radio.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at higher risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps. All right, thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Yes, thank you for coming back, spending your valuable time with Ransom Godwin from 420 TV Freedomist Films and myself, David Devine, here tonight on Revolution Radio Studio A, listener supported. So if you like this type of conversation and you've listened to the last hour, talking about rising food prices and why narratives are built in to explain it away with excuse after excuse, event after event, which we couldn't talk about on other platforms. Everything that's valuable. Can you continue to support Revolution Radio? Donation tab right at the top, freedomslips.com. And Ransom, I wanted to start the second session here. You know, we talked quite a bit about some ancient history and things going on right now with Russia and Ukraine, grain production. I've been surfing the news as well. So what I'm doing is screen grabbing a lot of stuff on my phone of comments, thoughts, whatever, of other people's opinions or, something I thought of interest that might be a nice conversation starter. So I'm going to start with the first 20. I'm just going to read something to you, throw some ideas, then I'm going to read you something else, throw some ideas, and I know we're going to have a good conversation of this. So we're going to talk about pronouns for a second here. The executive, under the executive order of the president, all persons are required to deliver on or before May 1st, 1933, all gold coin, all gold bullion, and all gold certificates now owned by them to the Federal Reserve Bank, branch, or agency, or to any member of the Federal Reserve System. Period. Now, see, today I could call it out and go, them. My pronoun's not them. I'm a he. That doesn't apply to me. You're going to have to change the verbiage on this thing. But I'm reading the executive order right here from 1933. Criminal penalties for violations of executive order: $10,000 fine, 10 years in prison for not turning over your gold, your physical gold, to get a piece of worthless paper, as provided by Section 9 in the order. Thank you. I'm not a them. That doesn't apply to me. What do you think, Ransom?
I think that sounds like a legit legal argument there. That's funny that you said 1933, and I was actually picturing the Nazis, but as soon as you furthered the conversation, I realized, oh yeah, that's right. We were doing that here too at the same time, seizing gold, seizing silver. Matter of fact, we've done that a couple times. But I think maybe that is a good. Maybe if we, word it right, the private standing army of the IRS and the Federal Reserve Bank won't come seize our property if we say they used the wrong pronoun on the paperwork. Or did they back themselves in the corner? Because I don't think that section of the government cares. But you're right. Maybe that's a good legal argument because if you don't identify as a them, then it's not applying to you. That's the new standard, is it not?
Yeah, you got to use the words back, just like Putin's doing at the moment. All right, this one comes from Jane. Let me see. A nation run by bankers will never be out of debt. A nation owned by weapons manufacturers will never know peace. A nation that allows a small segment of its citizens to write the laws will never know justice. And if all of these elements together own the media, we will never know the truth. Period.
Well, that's the way it is now, ain't it? I mean, you can pretty much connect all the councils, secret groups, media organizations, food distribution, banking, and connect the dots between all of them. It's really no secret. It's just like the people that make the laws about medicines are also employed by the medicine companies. I'll put it that way so we don't get keyworded. And then when you think about the food, all of the people that control the food are also, interchangeable in the government with those who decide which foods and who to buy it from. And this is the same with everything. And I think that may be something that they might be mentioning to the public very soon also, is that first idea that you were talking about seizing the precious metals. Because what else does a patriotic person do in time of war but give over all your wealth to support the effort?
Well, why did you say keywords? America is the freest country in the world. We have free speech. It's the freest in the world. Didn't you know, Ransom?
You hit the algorithm like 8 times just now.
The algorithm's giving you a thumb up, a boost up, man. Here we go. Justin in Canada. JT. Are we allowed to help people pay for their groceries who have had their bank accounts frozen? Or would that make us a collaborator and then have our bank accounts frozen? We never lived in a dictatorship before, so not sure of the optics. Period. That's a good one, man.
I don't even think there's really going to be much trouble with this financial arrangement until they threaten to halt your electronic benefits or your universal basic income. And when they halt that, that's when you'll see the real, troublemaking happening. Because I think the other group of people will try to strategize some kind of legal remedy for a long time, or they will fall back on their actual assets that they own. Versus people that, when they don't get that money monthly, everything is lost. It's a total, life-ending thing. And that happens with people with very little of anything all the time. When you can't pay the rent, you get kicked out. If you don't have enough money to get another place, your stuff's just on the curb there, getting gone through by people. And yeah, I don't know if anybody's been in one of those circumstances, but if you can't come up with a certain dollar amount and you don't own your land, it's a life-changing event every month. And millions of people live like this. They live month to month. Even the people that you probably look around in your neighborhood and think, I live in suburbia. Those people don't own their house and they don't own their car, and they're up to their neck in credit card debt. And just like you were saying, a nation of bankers will never let the populace not be in debt. There will always be a debt. There will always be a meter, and as long as we're making weapons, we're going to use them. And it's funny that I don't know if you've been paying attention to the kind of footage, but all the stuff getting blown up looks like 50s, 60s Cold War stuff. It reminds me a lot of, like, when we went in and bombed Iraq and Afghanistan. You'd see these old 60s style trucks and stuff like that got blown up. Like, we're just getting rid of old junk.
But there's a price at liquidation for that old junk, my friend, a 5% premium. I know you'd have to pay probably 10% more to dispose of all of that metal, but we can do it for you and create a profit for your company, as long as our two partners here are kicked in at 8% each above the VIG. Oh yeah, okay, let me read you the next thing here. Lessons from Canada. And so this is the whole thing. This war thing with Ukraine and Russia is going to bury anything out of Canada that has ever happened. Like, it will be a distant memory a week from now. So the reason I keep coming back to Canada is this would be the #1 story on the planet, along with the Freedom Convoy in the United States. If the war wasn't happening, Freedom Convoy and bank run continues in Canada would be the front page of every paper on the planet on how people are organizing, pulling their money out of the banks. And now you don't even hear about it. Nothing else except down to page 18 deep is Russian stuff. So lessons from Canada. We need to keep it fresh. Cash must never be abolished. And these are 5 different points here. Number 1, cash must never be abolished. Point number 2, money in the bank is not safe from government seizure. Number 3, the World Economic Forum and its young leaders are a terrorist organization. See, they're flipping the narrative. They're flipping the lexicon on the exact people that are creating this new woke world. Number 4, citizens without weapons are like slaves, defenseless against state oppression. And number 5, constitutions that do not categorically exclude all intrusions into civil liberties are all worthless. So where does that bring us in the modern world? Yeah, we're in at number 5 there. That's here in the States all the time, every single day. And we're infiltrated with World Economic Forum young leaders, Buttigieg, amongst the top. I saw this thing talking about these top politicians in the States, which I won't say the names because I don't want to flag the ALG, for their children, sons and daughters, are in Ukraine, working in Ukraine as top level people in top level, way beyond Hunter. Nancy also has, and you need to check out the other 2 as well. The Gang of 4 rides in Ukraine. So I don't know what you think about cash must never be abolished. Well, maybe if we could weave gold fibers in the cash. I saw this one company that was doing that. They're actually embedding gold into the money, into the paper itself. So you could, genetically, or not genetically, but run it under some sort of light meter and metallurgy test that would allow you to validate that there was that amount of gold sandwiched between the paper. So it looks like a dollar bill or whatever, like bills, 10s, 20s, 100s, but there's gold actually inside the paper. So it's not a bearer note like, hey, there's this much that's in the bank. It's actually in the paper. So you just put it on the desk or whatever, and somebody can verify there's 1/10 of a gram of gold, 100th of a gram of gold, 1/2 gram of gold embedded in the paper. It's a bearer note of gold in the paper. It's physical gold sandwiched in paper, and I give it to you. Now that's the way I think cash should be. And then it could be limited on the amounts out there, but can't get a loan for a house, man.
Well, that was a lot there.
I know, just throwing it out, man. Give me another glass of red.
I was just thinking about at the beginning there, you're kind of talking about, that the world's going to forget about Trudeau and the truckers convoy and all this because they threw Putin. It's almost like, on one side of the world, some leaders just called up and said, hey, we're having a little bit of trouble locking this down. And Putin was like, hey, no problem. We're going to go ahead and move into Ukraine like we were talking about before, and we'll just lock this whole thing down. it seems like they were working in concert. Oh, we need another bad guy that we're going to call Hitler, because people were pointing out that Trudeau was, acting like Hitler, sounding like Hitler, making moves like Hitler. And it's just funny that that's the key phrase that everyone's stuck on, and they use from both sides that same argument. So it's really a meaningless phrase now at this point. You kind of have to judge what's going on. And I know that they're going to want to end the paper money soon. And I think if any company, kind of did what you were talking and they got popular, they would be arrested. I think the Secret Service would come get them for destroying or manipulating currency. And especially when all of these places are trying to change over to the crypto world. I saw one here. It is, as the Fed considers minting the first digital dollar, and it's tapping experts from crypto companies and giving them a stake in the outcome. So you can see that we're headed in that direction, and it's almost like a video game. It seems like the population would run better if they would just print up. I don't know how many digital coins that are gold, and it's just like a video game out there in the world. We'll just quit playing games, and if you can't earn the coin from someone, you just don't get to do anything. And it would just be a whole system of just coins, just like on the video game. You're always jumping up and down getting the gold coins in there. That's crazy. Of course, we don't want to give over our control over the money. And right now, the Federal Reserve has had control mostly of the money, but what they don't have control of is the physical, aspect of holding most of it. But that's changed over time, and now most people are dealing with digital zeros and ones in the bank account. And you are absolutely right. They can just start taking it out. And I'm assuming that there are going to be new laws and restrictions if the same group of people keep running the United States, that are going to limit the freedoms of being able to transfer wealth in any shape. And I saw this other article. Russian oligarchs turned to crypto to skirt sanctions. So they're dumping a bunch of money in crypto, probably about 32 billion according to this article here. So you could look for a skyrocketing crypto soon. Because it's going to be holding a lot of wealth that's going around. And this is the way that they're redistributing wealth now, is that they're making a whole new technocratic system that the average Joe just doesn't understand and doesn't realize how to participate. So they're going to leave their money in their local credit union until it just turns into zero. And then what are they going to do? And we've seen this over and over again in other countries, where they start shutting off the ATM, limiting how much money you could take out of the bank. And then soon they just, the money flops and it's not even worth anything. So if you don't have, physical, solid things in your life, you're going to be, asked out. And speaking of that, I saw an article where the FDA is authorizing, and that if the FDA approves it or authorizes it, it's a good idea. I mean, they have a really good track record of authorizing emergency things for use in the time period we live in. So the FDA is authorizing the first ever condom made specifically for taking it up the rear, and that's a real article that's being pushed on all kinds of stuff. And I think that it's a little joke from them that we're about to, be on the receiving end of a massive change. And you know what I mean? I don't want to get too bad with the language, but we're about to, receive it in the rear end here in the U.S. too. And I think all these poor countries like Australia and New Zealand, they're about to go into a world of hurt. Unlike the last couple of years, they're going to keep pressing further and further on the populace until something breaks.
That's the plan. The plan is the most destruction created possible to create the most chaos, to hide what is happening with the maneuvers forward. Your crypto transactions, for example. So think about that. Just as something as okay, so they made Bitcoin drop to 35,000 and change, scared everybody. A lot of people sold. Companies are willing to pay $35,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a Bitcoin now, knowing it's going to be one part of the world reserve currency moving forward. Because see, the thing about crypto is yes, it's incredibly difficult for the average person to understand. And unless you have a want to get to other systems that are not controlled by central authority or distribution or permissions, like what would that be like for me as a creator to put my videos on that where I don't have to use any platform that YouTube that can censor me, where I could load my content directly into something on the blockchain where nobody could change it either? You know, for me, that why would you? I would definitely want something like that, because everywhere you look, there's been something being censored now. So I want my full content, full thought out there, uncensored, so anybody like Substack can grab it and pull it down. But this thing about crypto itself, because the off ramps right now are really difficult. They all need, I'm not going to say all, I'm going to say a majority, requires some sort of intermediary going back into a traditional bank before you can put that, you know, physical paper between your fingers from that crypto transaction, verified, and then how does that paper come back in your fingers? Well, unless you're trading with another person, like I come over to Ransom and say, Ransom, I want to sell you XYZ for $100, and you're like, yeah, and I said, I need $100 US, like put them on my fingers, and then we transfer. You know, we do the transaction, and then you can see it popped up in your wallet, and then you give me the $100. Except for that peer-to-peer transaction, there's no, you know, way to really jump out of the system and say it's still locked between two systems, and there's one that's not taking total control. And it's very much like the Denisovans and Neanderthals, or the Homo sapiens and the transhumans. It's the same thing happening. The crypto is living at the same time with the fiat. You know, gold and silver will be another base, but to try to really put it in that evenness of one's got to disappear so the other can take over and take precedent and move whatever genealogical system forward, the crypto needs to overtake fiat. And they both exist, but they're making it real difficult to jump out of the crypto system. It's easy to get in the crypto system, easy. More difficult to get your earnings out unless you're coming through a traditional bank. But then everybody knows after you sold on an exchange what your profit loss is, you're going to pay taxes on that, which you don't want to do if you don't have to. But I mean, keep everything above board. If you sold and you made some loot, then report that. You know, if there's other ways that you can go around that so nobody sees that transaction and you don't have to report that, well, you know, good on you, good thinking. But if you get caught in a transaction where it's a taxable event, pay it, because that's how they're going to come after you. If you did a taxable event in an exchange, that's on the right. That's what blockchain is. You can follow every transaction. You can't change it. It's immutable, non-changeable. So get that in your head too. Like the software might not be good enough now today to track every transaction. But I tell you what, there's millions and hundreds of millions of dollars being systems built for this exact thing, to track every transaction since the inception of day one of every single coin or protocol that has run through what is quote unquote cryptocurrency. Side chains, on chains, coins, forks, everything that's involved with it is going to be chased down, NFTs. So they're going to know eventually where every transaction went. So if there's a buy and a sell higher than, if you're in that system where you're on exchanges, you're probably going to want to jump off. And, you know, this is the sad thing. They were saying the advice I'm giving you right now is against the federal law in Canada because you're trying to show people how to go around the banking, because there was letters sent that said you have to turn over the crypto keys and all the transactions. But the custodians were saying, whoa, that's the reason that we build these types of wallets, so we don't know what the transaction is. We don't know their private keys. We don't know what they hold. That's the whole point of having a private encrypted wallet, is we don't know that stuff. That's why we build it, so everybody knows you can't see it, so we can't give you the information. Learn more about crypto, because they're just like, give us all. They didn't even know enough to say that a private wallet, and on your computer does. Or in your phone. They were trying to tell those types of things like Exodus Wallet or Atomic or something, give us all the keys. And they're like, well, we can't. It's built into the code, so you can't. You get it? Like, that's why blockchain's there. So if you're able to interact with these wallets now, which you can buy, sell inside the wallets using, I don't know, whatever swap. Each one offers different. That's not on an exchange. That's not on an exchange. That's completely outside the system. But again, you come back to the same thing. Yeah, you want to sell something because you're like, well, I want to buy a new generator or something. So you want to kick out some of the crypto. Are you going to find a place that really will take that crypto to buy for a generator in Lowe's? Or, there are some places that are more open to taking crypto, especially Bitcoin. But the transaction fees are so high. I was talking to, when we were walking down the street, we saw a street player playing a violin on the street corner, which I thought was kind of unusual, and I wanted to leave a donation. I thought, okay, but all he had was QR codes, like 4 QR codes on the inside of the guitar. And then I looked and I was saying, wait a second, and the transaction fee to give that guy $1 or $5, the transaction fee is like 6 times more than me giving the $5. And now with a congested network of everybody trying to sell because the war is happening, like your transaction fees, especially on the Ethereum blockchain, are just so ridiculous. You're paying like $600 a transaction. Even if you're moving $20, you got to pay $600 in fees. So that's why these other like Pirate Chain and Monero and a few others are on their own side chains there. Solana, there's a lot of faster protocols than. Anyway, I digress. I forgot what I was even talking about there, Ransom, but something with crypto and fiat being together at the same time as Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens and transhumans.
Yeah, one of them's got to go there. And what you were talking about is that weird changeover that is still exists right now. There's no way to get, the actual money out if they were trying to, stop you from doing something. You have the crypto, but you still need that transfer to get it into something that everyone takes. And I don't know. Are we going to have a future of encrypted information shared between people in the future as kind of a backdoor currency where you can be paid instantly? Like if I gave someone a bunch of information where you live, you could go over and get some goods from them because I paid them through information. I don't know how that's going to work out, and I don't think that there's any better barter than good old-fashioned physical barter of tools, food, and stuff like that. That's just going to be something that's always going to take place, and I don't think any government anywhere can ever stop that kind of black market. Another thing I was tripping on is when you were talking about this, I was thinking about this same concept, the new tech versus the old tech. And, when I was watching them blow up all these 50s, 60s big trucks and stuff with the newer missile and guns on top of the back, it looked like, something that they definitely wouldn't want farmers or just random people to get a hold of these big trucks with the diesel motors and because that's something that the locals could use as resources, even though it's older. And the same thing's true here. So you could look into the automotive industry and you'll find out some weird things that are happening right now. Like they are destroying more cars than ever before. And America has a lot of cars per person compared to other nations. But a lot of these older gasoline models are getting crushed at an absolutely astronomical rate. For a long time, there was a parts industry with these cars and they would store them so people could get parts. But now it's more beneficial for them on these older cars to just crunch them and recycle them, which reduces the number of options you have out there for older digital cars that would run with a motor despite any kind of interference electronically, if you know what I mean. So what's a way that, if we're looking forward to the next couple of years of just no food, I mean, there's only a couple simple answers that people can do. And I don't know what to tell people that don't have space, because you need a little bit of space and access to water, and you can last a long time. Look at all of the previous generations that made it through hard times, the people that got through, or the people that knew how to feed themselves off of the land where they lived and find clean water. And with all the municipalities now that's going to be a very interesting problem to solve for people, is how to get their own water away from the governments when the cracking down of products happens. And I see that starting right now. And like we were talking about on previous shows, I think we're still in the phase of getting people used to it. They're getting the Pavlov training kind of done to the public about, wear your mask, step 6 feet apart. Once they get the mass population to jump through the hoops of stupid human tricks, it's not hard to give them new commands. And this is just the way it is. There's so many people in the public that have that attitude about it is what it is, and that's just the way it is, and all of these other sayings. And what they're really saying is that they're willing to accept any new program rules or mandates that's put upon them. So that makes it harder and harder for the individual that's trying to get around those systems and be self-sufficient. So when does it, do you think that it's even possible for a bunch of people to just hide basically from the world and do their own thing? Or is it going to be like a Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand type situation, where a group of kind of capitalistic inventor types get tired of sharing their resources, knowledge, and accomplishments with the other group of people that just wants to take and never contribute? So it's a bizarre thing. What do you think about that? I mean, is that what's going to have to happen? Is different technological breakaways, the kind of the freer people versus the communist people, and the fight over the technology to decide who gets to live according to those systems?
Elysium, the movie, would I guess start the first answer portion. But, if you think about living overseas up until just 2 years ago, say the year in 2019 when all the COVID restrictions started, if it was as crazy as it is right now in any country that you're in, you could just get on a plane and then fly somewhere else and you'd be totally out of it. Out of here, I land somewhere else and it's totally different, and you don't even hear a peep from back whatever country it was. So imagine if you're in the Ukraine, you could fly over to France, and France was like it was in 1995, and everything was just functioning perfectly, and you land in the airport, and you're like, oh, nothing going on, man. 0%, and everything's opulent and nice and functioning, and supply chains, and like, whoa, you dropped into a completely different world. You could leave that world if you wanted to. I'm out of here. So if you're unhappy with what was going on, like, imagine if we were encapsulated just in the States with all this stuff going on, you would want to get out of here, like, bye-bye, airplane ticket, and you could. The difference now is it's everywhere with the same exact thing. Like, there's nowhere you can go to get really out of the COVID thing. And since you know that, you already know the next set of things that will be implemented, restrictions. Again, you say everybody started jumping through all the hoops, doing all these things. Well, why would it not take too much now to convince everybody? Ration card's next. Forget the face mask. Ration card is next. But it takes a compliant populace for that. And then, instead of going to rationing, why wouldn't we teach people how to grow food? And instead of, rejecting contracts to drill more oil wells here in America, actually turn the pipes back on that were turned off that would deliver oil. Just start with that. Forgetting any new drilling, just turn the pipes back on so the oil flows again that's backed up. What do you think about that for 6 or 8 months before it even comes to the next round of talks about that? It's the same idiocy. So the oil's there, it's just blocked up. Pipelines turned off. I don't know. I'm hoping it's an A or B choice, A or B comparison, I should say. You can't get it out of anywhere now, man. It's not like that anymore. The entire planet has changed completely. There's no more escape. Except a private island, maybe, owned by billionaires, where it was hands off from every government there. Then maybe. Otherwise, ransom, I don't have an answer.
I'm kind of wondering when some of the things that have been done kind of in the shadows over the past couple decades, dealing with the potable water that's available for different people and nations, because that's going to be a major factor. It's the water. Water is life, and you can't grow food in certain areas without that water, and you can't drink, and all of these things. But a few, maybe a decade ago, there were a lot of moves to acquire the Earth's aquifers, and you've pointed that out about the Middle East. But a lot of people don't know, like T. Boone Pickens and other people like him bought up all the water rights in North America, just about. And the Bush families have pretty much taken their sector in South America, and they haven't implemented, like anything with these rights. I'm sure they're getting some kind of money out of it. But when you think about these groups that have absolute control of certain portions of the world's functionality, they can change things so fast. And so far, we're just getting used to the not being able to have what products you need, and then it's not enough food to do what you think you should be living like. But then what about if there's rations on water? Because the people that want to squeeze the public also have control of these other things, and they have yet to use that as a weapon, because they have so many of these other controls going. It kind of just makes me wonder, at which point do they add the water to this formula? And another question is I'm sure with you talking to lots of people on your show, you've come across people that maybe have invented or in the line of inventing some way to pull water out of the air. I actually know how to do it with just an air conditioner. If you tilt the air conditioner in a certain direction, it'll cause a lot of excess condensation, and you can drain that water, and it'll give you gallons a day in the desert where I live. And you can then filter that water and use that water, or just use it for the plants. It's pulling stuff out of the air. It's kind of like beyond water, or the idea of just pulling stuff right out of the air. And I'm sure there's all kinds of bad stuff in there, but you'd have to filter it out. But what are some stuff that about that you could actually farm with, technologies that you can do to have water to supply your food? Because without the water, there just is no growing the food.
Drinkable water first. I have a story from the last couple of days, personal story. So it's been pouring rain, like super unbelievable rains, where we were driving down to the post office, and an area that I had only ever seen as a field was completely underwater. It turned into, it looked like a giant lake. Just these last couple of days. So on my own property, running around, taking a look at how heavy the water was, there is a pond at the bottom of the shared property area here, but it's spring fed, and it's always pretty, I'm going to say very pretty, very clear. They're not crystal clear exactly. It does get that way, but it's always very clear enough where you could dip in and then put it through some sort of Berkey filter, and it would be just fine. It would take out the bacteria and whatever after you boiled it or not. But after these heavy rains, it is a soupy, thick mud shake, basically. Like if I was to scoop out of there, I would clog up my filters so fast that you'd have to think of a pre-filter before you could even get the water down in. And then, that comes back into, do you have any charcoal laying around? Do you have can you make a fire to make charcoal? Do you have enough sand? How many layers? Do you have big rocks, small rocks, medium in there? Have any kind of like moss or something else in there just to get it as a pre-filter? So then I'm thinking, all right, well, if the spring-fed pond is completely soupy muddy like a mud milkshake, then go higher uphill. So started walking around today, look at the different water drops and like places where water was coagulating where there was almost no mud in it. So word of advice, if you come to a muddy area, follow that uphill until you find where the water source is coming down, because it's, the night and day difference of cleanliness, I can't even describe it. Like one's clean water coming down from the mountain in the rainfall after it's been raining for like 5-10 hours, and then that's clean after all the mud and all the debris gets washed down in the first couple hours. After that, it's just water, compared to where it's pooling at way down there where it's a super mud shake. So always go uphill to get cleaner water when it's raining, because the bottom is where everything's pooling. That's what's creating all the runoff. That's all the mud. Everything's running in there from higher up on the hill. So If you're going to look for that kind of water drinking during a storm, you're not going to put your tongue out and wait for every drop to go down. And at that point, you could start filling up rain barrels and all kind of other things. You could put hoses up in the middle of the flow and then get the gravity feed down. There's a lot of things you could do if you know where the cleaner water is, especially on the hillside. Use gravity. Gravity's your friend. Believe me, gravity is your friend. On water going downhill to fill up barrels. Other times it could be, but anyway. So that's my personal story about, drinkable water and thinking about it.
Yeah, it kind of makes me want to start thinking, if there was a grid down situation and I didn't have power and I live in the desert where it may or may not rain for any, period of time, I could actually use solar power to run some kind of small machine like a air conditioner that, like I was saying, when you make it malfunction, it actually does this job. But I'm sure there's a more efficient machine that you could put together that would cause condensation to collect, and then you could, filter the water. But you're lucky that you live in an area that's, classically and probably for the foreseeable future going to have plenty of water. But for a lot of the grow zones out west, water is sporadic and periodic, and also depends on what I brought up before, the aquifers that happen to be owned by billionaires now. So there's it's just so hard to break away from the system, but that is the answer. How do you get off of their power system? How do you make your own heat and filter your own water? And that's actually a good thing to know how to do, just as a basic human being living on the planet, is how are you going to filter out some water if you don't really have nothing? And rocks and gravity and charcoal are your friend, and that's an ancient way of doing it. And then you would also have to boil it out and boil it out again, and hope that there's no, micro particles that will still mess you up. But I was thinking, I brought this up on my last show. A couple went, camping, and they brought their baby along with them, and they brought their jackets and their phone. But what they didn't bring is any way to make fire, any way to filter water, any way to stay warm whatsoever. And it was just like a really tragic, senseless death. Because any number, like 2 or 3 things in my pack that I have 2 or 3 of, go bags, and some that are just like travel packs, I put certain things in there, like space blankets. I got a water filter in there, things to make fire, some kindling, just, just simple things, just having on you that don't take up much space and are very light to just have with you everywhere would have saved these people's lives. And if they can't handle that, I was trying to make this point last night. If they can't handle just being out in the wilderness, unfortunately, all of them died. And the authorities say that was due to dehydration and hypothermia. They just didn't know. They were ignorant to nature. And there are millions of people like this, unfortunately. So like when we start having problems with the grid, just imagine those type of people. They have no idea where to look, how to look, to eat, drink, or stay warm or stay cool. I mean, it's just amazing how regressed we really are. How much further, in the future do you can predict that the next several generations that are upcoming will have zero knowledge of how to be a human being on the earth. And that's the key to staying here, is being able to adapt to the, like your show's called, adapt to the changing environment we call Earth. And I was reading this article here that's pretty much talking about what we were talking about, except for they're putting it in the global warming climate change arena. And they're saying climate change is changing Earth's water cycles faster than predicted. Is that actually true, or is it the same water cycles that we've had for a really long time? And if you know which cycle's coming, can you predict how to adjust to it fast enough for regular people to survive without the system?
Yes. North African monsoon is shifting, bringing more rainfall in through the central Sahel. Has been for 30 years now. But now it's really, really, really upticked. And even to the point where, what they call them, cyclones are rolling up into Yemen and Oman and dropping record rainfall in the driest place on the planet, turning some of those dune areas with the depressions in them into lakes. Then we have the North American monsoon shifting here. So all those articles you keep reading, oh, it's the driest it's been in 1,200 years. Well, the North African monsoon is a 4,000 year cycle. So would it not make sense that we'd transit through the 2,000, 3,000 year period before we got to? But it's dry at this point, but the shift in North American monsoon right now turns it wetter as we move forward. Yeah, there might be a dry spell or two in between, but it's going to be an extreme also. But the general trend is wetter, bringing more moisture up through Mexico, directly up into the desert Southwest. Now, this is on a longer trend, so I'm talking about a 4,000 year cycle here. But the cycle's trending toward more water. It shifted. And the North African monsoon too. Also, that shift is pushing more precipitation into Morocco. And, fact checkers out there, look up record grain production in Tunisia, Egypt, Algeria. These countries are showing record grain production because there's more rainfall coming in there naturally so they can grow more crops. Now, Gaddafi was tapping into the Nubian sandstone aquifer and bringing water from below the feet, not very far below, by the way, up to irrigate the crops. Again, that whole region of rock at the Mediterranean was a filter that took salt water and turned it into fresh water in central Libya off the coast of the Mediterranean. So if you dug in there and you could use that below groundwater resource, and then the rain's increasing from above, and you have the above ground shifting North Africa monsoon. North Africa and Central Africa, what they call the Sahel right now, is going to be some of the most productive growing lands on the entire planet. Because you can get 2 crops there. It's sunny all the time. Temperatures really never get that cold in winter. You can grow crops continuously. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but if you're getting into the Sahel region, yeah, you're getting down near the equator. You can grow all year round. Because I look here at this Russian, we talked about fertilizers. Well, here's a new one that came off on the 2nd of February. Russia imposed an ammonium nitrate ban for 2 full months right into the planting season. So look, now we got urea shortages, ammonium nitrate shortages, nitrogen shortages, potassium shortages, glyphosate shortages, all these other things that keep adding into food. So look back to the past, how did people survive this in the past? And what stories have you heard of people's survival techniques? Obviously growing the food. What if it gets too cold? Then what? But these shifts are gargantuan. Like these cycles inbound are multi-thousand year cycles that we're going into. So you think the change on how to run a society or central banking or whatever creates value in a society is going to change with it. It has to. Everything needs 1,000 years plural cycle, thousands of years cycle inbound happening right now. And our old system from 50 years is going to outlast something on a 2,000 year cycle. It needed to change anyway. We're at the end of the time. So I'm just looking at, how do we keep ourselves positive during these moments there, Ransom? What do you think? Stay positive. Feed the light vibration, not the darkness. Grow your own food.
I'm trying to this year. I want to grow. I want to see just how much we can produce with the small amount of land, with or without conditions. I'm already got stuff inside because I made the mistake last year of waiting till the weather was good outside to start putting it out. And I've read the Farmer's Almanac that's talking about, we're probably going to have some late winter items this year, which goes along with, what I've been seeing. I think we're going to have quite a wintry spring. So I'm going to have to wait to get these plants all outside, and then hopefully, we have a good season. And this year I'm trying to get those staples, beans, potatoes, corn, stuff like that we could just store back. But like I said, it all needs water. And if you live in the desert areas, you're dependent on municipalities to provide that water unless you come up with some unique strategies, which I save every bit of water when it does come off in buckets that comes off of the house, which is quite a bit because when it downpours in the desert, it puts off gallons and gallons of water that immediately are absorbed by the super dry soil. But it doesn't really evaporate as fast as it does whenever it's poured all over the ground on the big surface area. So you can save gallons and gallons of water. And actually, last year I did pretty good at watering. Supplementing the watering with just water I saved in buckets, and then it gets all those dead flies and stuff. You got to seal it off though, so that you're not producing, pests like mosquitoes and other stuff. However, you can stretch out the rain. Unless you live in Oregon, who, in that state, they've made it illegal to try to capture water. Because they claim that the government, the almighty government, owns the rain that falls over your land. So when you come up against these type of situations, I really don't know what to do. I think that's when things are going to turn in a direction that we can all see where it's going. Whenever, like I said, whenever everything starts to get cut off and rationed and people have had enough, there will be a breaking point where people are just going to do what they're going to do regardless of rules, regulations, and mandates. And like you said, it's up to the people actually of any given place to change the environment up to a point as far as the political and government environment, to let them know what they can and cannot get away with. And if you look into the past, there's been several revolutions where the people got dragged out, shot, or beheaded in just the recent history of the world. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more of that in the upcoming year or two until 2024. Which is a weird date that just keeps coming up. I saw a thing the other day that was put out that was talking about 2022 was the return of Pluto in the Vedic chart, the planet's return at the same time as our country's founding, and that this period of change or destruction would last 2 years, according to that cycle, into 2024. So imagine that, what a coinkydink.
2 full years, huh? Because I'm looking at this one, see, it's a percentage here. It says when food prices rise to a point where they exceed 30% of disposable income, civil unrest become highly probable. So where do we sit? Well, in America, it's barely 10%. It used to only be barely 10% of disposable income went to food. Now that number is much higher today. It's around 15. So in the U.S., we have some of the lowest food costs in the entire planet. So if you're complaining about food costs here, you need to go anywhere else and be shocked. I mean, to the point of being numb on how expensive things are for food. Pakistan, they were saying 45%, but that was in 2019-20. 45% was spent of disposable income on food in Pakistan. That number has definitely gone up above 50%. So just say 30%. So how long is it before the whole entire world experiences 30% of disposable income for food purchases? I don't know. I don't have that math. I don't have that computer in front of me to do their calculation. But anyway, grow your own food. Get some seeds.
Yeah, one of the trippy things I noticed when we were visiting Mexico is how absolutely cheap it was to go eat anywhere. And then, you would think that the way it used to be when you go to Mexico and you could buy, items like clothing and different things for cheap. It's absolutely not that way anymore. Like things that you would buy here in America, the dime a dozen, are very expensive. They're shoes, jackets, hats, clothes of any kind. However, you could go for, under $20 and feed like 6 people at a restaurant and eat good. And everywhere you go there in Mexico City, you see fresh melons, vegetables, fruit, and these are kind of off the side. These aren't the grocery stores that I'm talking about. These are independent vendors that are growing their own food, and they're providing all kinds of food for the lower class, people that don't have the money even to pay for what we think is super cheap food. And I was amazed at that, how cheap it was to eat there. However, everything else was super expensive, and you would think that even the difference of America to there, that a lot of things would be cheaper, but the opposite, in fact, was the truth. Now, how long until government crackdowns start seizing and taking portions of even those people's crops? I don't know what to tell you about that.
A lot stronger pushback than would be probably felt in the U.S. in the beginning. We're in for strange times. Remember that old Chinese saying, may you live in interesting times. Well, you are going to, beginning now. And I'm not laughing, I'm just laughing at all the absurdity of it all, because it's so planned to create as much chaos to usher in new systems. At the same time, one of these new systems will be your access to food, which you need a digital ID and some sort of digital ration card, but you won't get that without getting another type of digital ID first. That can be added on to the original whatever ID system they're trying to use. They were trying to use ID Me here in the States for tax purposes, but that, didn't work, having a third party hold that information. It's like having a third party hold your keys. You're not going to give your private keys to a third party. That's what exchanges are for. Like, why would you do that with your personal information? Like, give it to a third party? No way. Put it on the blockchain so nobody can see it. It's encrypted. And you can have both keys for the encryption and just load your document in the blockchain. Like, why would you rely on a third party to do that when there's already systems built on blockchain for that very purpose? So you don't have to show anybody what it is. Nobody else can see it except the two parties that are interacting. Like, that's crazy. Why would you give it to a third party? So that'll all be part of getting access to food. You can see the steps moving forward. So, you might want to buy a little bit extra food, things that you can make scratch items from. And really take a look at your supermarket this weekend and see, is it outrageous? Have people really, is there going to be an overabundance or amount of people in the supermarkets this weekend? I don't know. What do you think, Ransom? More people this weekend in the supermarkets or not? We got a couple minutes left here.
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's part of the psychological pattern of supermarkets I used to work in. Any kind of emergency or perceived emergency, people tend to buy about 20% more groceries. So like if you live in a town that doesn't snow that often and it snows like a half an inch, the grocery store will be emptied out of food because people psychologically worried about that. And what's really funny about these rationing things is I don't think it's going to be a hard changeover because people are already on the food stamp system, which there's a joke in New Mexico because they call the program EBT. And people joke about that, when there's money on the card and you're juiced up at the beginning of the month, at the first of the month or the 5th of the month, whatever, it stands for Eat Better Today. And just like everybody else is going to have to get used to, when there's no money on the card, it stands for Eat Beans and Tortillas. So, stock up on the beans, stock up on the things that you could just sit in your house without climate control. That will be fine. And you can make it years with just a little bit of clean water.
That's some wise advice right there. Sleep on that. Know there's solutions to the problems. Thanks for joining. David Dubine. About 2030 signing off here along with Ransom Godwin, 420 TV Freedomist Films. Check them out over on YouTube. A few censorship issues there on that, but show the support. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Waking up to ash and dust, I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals. up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals.
Guess I'll just close my eyes.